Smashing Machine is a 2025 American film directed by Benny Safdie and stars Dwayne Johnson and Emily Blunt. It's actually based on the 2002 documentary of the same name about former mixed martial arts fighter Mark Kerr, detailing his rise and ultimate fall in the early world of mixed martial arts. I've actually been wanting to watch that doc for like a couple years now, but it's like borderline lost media. Oddly enough, I've heard that it's incredibly good, and it was only released on DVD, which is at this point like almost impossible to find. And I just want to say that although I do like early like UFC stuff, you don't really have to be a huge combat sports fan to watch this necessarily. Kind of like the Iron Claw from 2023, but I guess it would help. I think the first thing I'll address here is the fact that I'm not really sure if I've ever seen a movie based directly on a documentary. At least maybe not like this that I can think of. Honestly, though, I do think it's an awesome idea, but I also don't think it particularly works. At least, at least the way that that should have. But I'll get to that. And this was actually one of my more anticipated films of 2025. For a few reasons, but mostly I just wanted to see if Dwayne Johnson could leave, his comfort zone and, deliver a serious performance, the caliber that a movie like this would need. And I'm not necessarily, a fan of his, but this seems like a passion project for him, and I was really rooting for him in this role. Emily Blunt, I already knew, can bring the heat. So the beginning shows Mark Kerr in his first mixed martial arts fight against Paul Verlins, who gets the complete daylights beat out of him. Poor fella. I've seen the real fight, and it's actually much harder to watch than the recreation for this movie. And Paul was a younger dude from Alaska too, but for some reason the guy that played him in this film looked way older, and they said he was from California. It's not a big deal, but I always wonder why they change shit like that. But it is an important scene, though, because it shows, Mark's true colors as well. Because after the fight, he's, like, super concerned about Paul and whether he was okay or not. So, yeah, I liked that about Mark. And then the film kind of breezes through Mark's, next few fights, which he wins all of them, showing that his career is, it's on the up and up. But then you see him at his doctor's office in another great scene, but it's also the first of my complaints, I think. The scene is, likely taken directly from the doc. At least that's what I assume or what I guess. But I could be wrong. And it's where Mark's in the waiting room, at his doctor's office, and he starts talking to an older woman. And he seems to just be this friendly guy, who likes to start conversations. And he notices that she was looking at his bruised up face, and he asks, if she is familiar with the UFC. And it's got that great part from one of the trailers where she asks if the fighters hate each other while they fight, and he just smiles and just says, "Absolutely not." It's a great scene. I like it. But it's when he's in the doctor's exam room where it shows him like staring at bottles of injectable opiates, and that was the beginning of my issue, or some of my issues with this film. Because this is still pretty early on, and in the next scene, he's basically already addicted to prescribed, painkillers. Downfall of many, many Americans around this time. And I knew this about Mark Kerr, but the introduction of his spiral into addiction into this story was just a little bit too sudden, and it seemed kind of rushed, and dare I say, a little sloppy. Because, probably, like, the entire, like, second act focuses on his addiction, related downfall without really explaining too much of how he got there or any nuance really at all. We know how he got there, but we just needed a little bit more connective tissue, I think. So this extends to Mark's longtime girlfriend, Dawn, played by Emily Blunt. I had heard about their relationship, being pretty rocky, pretty much most of the time. Largely due to them probably just not being right for each other. That's what I've read and been told over the years. Dawn was known, to party and drink excessively, which was kind of confusing to me because it rarely shows her like indulging. She just acted drunk throughout most of the film. At least that's what I saw. And this is zero criticism of her performance, by the way, because she does give, in my opinion, the best one of the entire film. And if anything, she might be a little bit underutilized here. An actress, the caliber of Emily Blunt. Another thing that I didn't really expect was that things, in my opinion, were kind of made to look like the Rocky relationship was kind of more Mark's fault, which is fine. I get that he was struggling, especially after losing his first MMA fight ever, because he was high and, he didn't really have it in him to fight. He didn't really, I think it seemed like he was kind of losing, inspiration or motivation or whatever. But he did seem to just nitpicked on way too much. Because I remember reading that it was that they were kind of both part of the problem almost equally. So I did I'll be honest, I kind of expected her to be painted as much more of a problematic person. It seemed to me like her biggest fault was kind of being a bad influence on Mark, especially when he was trying to work through his addiction and just completely be clean of any substances. So I think the way that their relationship was portrayed was kind of sloppy and maybe even uneven, kind of clunky. And now to address Dwayne Johnson's performance, because this was at least half the reason I showed up, because I love watching an underdog. I love a good underdog story, and I see him as that, as an actor, in a movie like this. I mean, first, he's playing the role of a man literally half his age. And then normally I'd say, fuck that, get someone else, but I actually wanted this for Dwayne. And overall, he's pretty good. I liked him here. I really did. Not perfect. There are some, more emotional scenes where, he maybe could have just been slightly more convincing, but just slightly. And I back him pretty much fully. And I think it was the writing that could have been a little bit better here. Not the dialogue necessarily, but scene structuring, stuff like that. So as far as other characters here, this will kind of only really interest, the old MMA fans, because they're pretty much all fighters, which is cool, because I knew that at least some of them were in the 2002 doc, so they did belong here, and I really liked all of them personally. Most notably being Mark Coleman, played by MMA fighter Ryan Bader, who I didn't really know anything about, and had actually never acted before, but he does okay here. He kind of, the fact that this movie's kind of supposed to look like a documentary kind of propped him up a little bit, kind of filled in the gaps with his inexperience. It worked. And they also had, you also have former MMA legend Bas Rutten, who coaches Mark, and he was in the doc as well. So I think it goes without saying, I had mixed feelings with this film. I did like it. I'll definitely be watching it again, when it comes out on, on Blu-ray or whatever, but I couldn't help but feel disappointed at numerous points. From what I've heard, the documentary, is much better. But back to what I said about this being a film based on a documentary, because again, I loved the idea, but I also think that if you aren't aware, of that aspect, this might come off as kind of a jumbled, weird watch for you. But another thing, and I hate to say it, but Mark Kerr's story isn't really unique, and it's just really not that interesting. He seems like a cool guy, and I'm glad that he made it out alive, and, likely a better man for it. So I'm giving The Smashing Machine a 7 out of 10. I wanted it to be, this year's The Iron Claw, but it does fall short. I wanted that kind of emotional, cathartic moment, or maybe a few of them if we're lucky, but they were just kind of few and far between. There's one or two, but just not quite up to what I wanted it to be, I guess. But that said, total respect to Dwayne Johnson for giving it his all. Maybe now I'll finally watch the last film, Uncut Gems, finally, by Benny Safdie. I've been wanting to watch that for a while. Cheers, guys, and I'll see you at the multiplex.